Disclaimer. The following video contains detailed descriptions of abuse, kidnapping, and psychological manipulation. Some viewers may find the content distressing or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back, everybody, to my channel. I'm so happy to be here. Today we're going to be deep diving into another crime case. Today we're going to be talking about Asha Degree, a 9-year-old who disappeared in the year 2000. Now, this case is a little more widely known and plenty of people have talked about this. So if you guys are curious to know a lot more about the case, after this video there will be plenty of sources for you guys to check out. I highly recommend the Crime Junkie podcast if you guys are into that. Otherwise, I'm sure YouTube has plenty of documentary style videos. Now, on a cold night in February 2000, a 9-year-old girl walked out of her home in Shelby, North Carolina, and into the pages of an unsolved mystery. For over 2 decades, the question has remained: what happened to Asha Degree? During this deep dive, we're going to be exploring almost every facet of this baffling case. And with that, remember guys, even though I do try to do my best to make sure everything is as accurate as possible, I make mistakes, catch something that is off, let me know. Do my best to fix it. Otherwise, I'll also be mentioning that there are certain sections where there's either conflicting statements or the facts aren't exactly clear, making it kind of difficult to point out exactly which is true, but I will mention those when we come across them. Now let's get to know a little bit about Asha Degree, who she was and exactly what role she plays. Now, born on August 5th, 1990 in Shelby, North Carolina, Asha Degree was described by those who knew her as shy but intelligent, a bookworm who excelled in school and loved sports, especially basketball. Get back to that one. Asha lived with her parents, Harold and Aquila Degree, and her older brother O'Brien, in a modest home in Oakcrest Drive. Aquila is how Google was telling me to pronounce the name, so I'm gonna have to apologize if that name is said incorrectly. Now, the Degree family was tight-knit, strong religious values. Asha and O'Brien were raised in a strict but loving household. Now, little Asha was a 4th grader in Foustone Elementary School, where she was known for her good grades and perfect attendance. Her teachers described her as a diligent student who got along well with her classmates. Now, Asha wasn't just a bookworm. She was an active member of her school's basketball team, wearing the number 45 with pride. Her coach noted that despite being one of the smallest players, Asha had a big heart and always gave 110% on the court. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Sounds like the beginning of a heartwarming family movie. Trust me, this story is about to take a turn not even the most imaginative scriptwriter could think of. Interestingly, just days before her disappearance, Asha's team had lost a basketball game, the first of the season. Some reports do suggest that Asha was upset about falling out of the game, but I will have you know, I also have conflicting reports that kind of say otherwise, so keep that in mind. But could this seemingly minor event, if it's true, played a role in what's about to come soon? Circle back to this later. Now let's talk about the day before the disappearance. On February 13th, we're gonna go ahead and set the stage for what a typical day for the Degree family was. On February 13th, family attended church in the morning. After church, they would visit Asha's aunt, who lived close by. In the afternoon, the family went to buy Asha new shoes. They returned home. Asha and O'Brien went off and played together. They would end up helping their mother do laundry, and they would have dinner together. This is all very, very normal for them. 8-ish p.m., Asha and O'Brien went to bed in the room they shared. Nothing about this day seemed out of the ordinary. There was no signs of what was to come. No indications that this would be the last normal day in the Degree household for a very long time. But here's where things get interesting. Sometime that night, power went out in their neighborhood for a few hours. Could this seemingly unsuspicious event have played a role in what's about to unfold? Well, you guys gotta stick around. We're about to dive right into this mystery. Now, this night, the night of the disappearance, break it down minute by minute. Around 8 p.m. is when Asha and O'Brien would go to their room that they shared. Now, their parents, Harold and Akila, would be watching TV in the living room. And of course, this is one of the moments where I'll have to say, I'm not too sure if their dad was actually in the house yet by 8 p.m. Some articles do make it a little confusing as to whether they would stay up watching TV after or before their dad would get back from work. If their dad even worked that day. There are conflicting reports, but whether their dad worked that day and came home, it's not going to be playing a role here. Either way, at some point, the parents would be watching TV late at night. As one of the reports states, the father would come home around midnight on February 14, which also happens to be their wedding anniversary. Their dad, at about 12:30 a.m., would go and check on Asha and her brother, and he would find both children to be sound asleep in the bedroom they shared. He would check on them again at about 2:30 a.m. that night, before he would go to bed, once again still finding them asleep. Now at this point, that'd probably be the point where we start to scream, "Dad, go back and check again. Do not go to bed. Go and check again." But unfortunately, this is not a scary movie, and things do not go as planned. Now, he had no reason to believe that his daughter had woken up, let alone left the house without them knowing. As of right now, the reigning theory assumes Asha leaves the house sometime after 2:30 a.m. Now, O'Brien would later report hearing noises as he thought Asha was turning over in her bed. He didn't think much of it at the time. O'Brien, if you had only turned on the light and checked. But not much would come of that. Now, between 2:45 and 3:15 a.m., early mornings of February 14, it's where things take a little bit turn to the bizarre. Now, two different truck drivers would report a young girl walking along Highway 18, about a mile away from the Degree home. First driver, Roy Blanton Sr., sees the girl at about 3:45 a.m. He's concerned because it's dark, raining, and cold. It's not exactly the ideal conditions for a nighttime stroll. Now, I have had a report that states Blanton turns his truck around to check on the girl, but by the time he gets to the spot, she's nowhere to be seen. This has only been said by one source that I have found. Of course, people, like always I say, go do your research. Do not trust everything a guy on the internet tells you. Now, Roy here was the one who alerted other truck drivers about Asha, or the mysterious girl he sees, over his CB radio. In an interview over a decade after Asha's disappearance, Detective Tim Adams of the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office stated, this was the last time anyone had a sighting of Asha that actually has been confirmed. Thus, that mysterious girl is almost very likely Asha. Now, the second driver we'll talk about is Jeff Roop, or Rupe, could be French. Also spots the girl a short time later. Like Blankton, he's struck by the oddity of a young child out alone in such conditions. Jeff claimed after he saw Asha walking down the highway, he found a place to turn around, then headed back to where he had seen the young girl. When he allegedly drove up alongside Asha and asked if she needed help, he says she ran up the highway and into the woods, where she would vanish into the darkness. He reported she was wearing a white dress, which could have been her white nightgown. Now let's pause for a moment. Consider the sheer audacity of a 9-year-old girl deciding to take a stroll on a highway in the middle of the night. Don't know about you, But when I was 9, the scariest thing I could imagine was the monster under my bed, let alone wandering alone in the dark highway. Now, 6:30 in the morning, February 14, Aquila, which by the way, again, I'm sorry if I'm missaying that completely. Aquila enters the kids' bedroom to wake them up for school. To her horror, Aisha's bed is empty. Family searches the house, calls relatives, checks neighbors, no signs of Aisha. Now, O'Brien later did recall that he had heard Aisha get up after 2:30 a.m., but he assumed she was simply going to use the bathroom and quickly fell back to sleep. Not too long after this, Harold would call the police to report her daughter missing, and thus begins one of the most extensive searches in North Carolina history. Now, due to her age, Aisha was never considered a runaway, which is why police began an aggressive investigation the same day she was reported missing. The response to Aisha's disappearance was swift and massive. Let's break down the initial investigation. The very first day, February 14, local law enforcement immediately begins searching the area around the Degree home. The FBI would be called to assist with the investigation. Command posts would be set up at a nearby fire department. Now, approximately 60 volunteers were searching for Aisha by the end of the day, and this is once again one of those numbers that is often conflicting, where I've heard hundreds and I've heard 60. I'll go by my source, which says 60 volunteers the first day. In the next couple of days, the search expands to cover a 10 square mile area around the Degree home. Helicopters with infrared sensors are brought in to scan the area. Search dogs are used to try to pick up Aisha's scent. Unfortunately, they would not pick up on anything. Divers search local ponds and lakes. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children also would get involved. Now, I know what you're thinking here. How does a 9-year-old girl just disappear without a trace? Oh, buckle up. Things only get more weird. Here's some key initial findings that we must go over. Aisha's backpack and other belongings were missing from her room. There was also no signs of forced entry into their home. The weather that night, cold, rainy, temperatures around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. Now, considering the weather, none of Aisha's winter clothes were missing. And also, a green car was reportedly seen in the area of the time of Aisha's disappearance. Now, Aisha's family initially reported that her white sneakers, her white jeans, her black book bag, a purse with a Tweety Bird design were the only things missing, and that she had likely been wearing her nightgown as a shirt. In 2015, Detective Tim Adams, during the re-investigation of the case, would say apparently she packed her bag prior to leaving, but the contents, from what we could tell, looked like something a child would pack rather than her parents preparing her for an overnight stay. Those are just quotations because I'm reading exactly what he said. Now, investigators were baffled. Why would a 9-year-old girl leave in the middle of the night? On a cold and rainy night, to be specific. And where could she have gone? Now, on February 15, which there was one source that had reported February 17, but more than one have said the 15th. So we're going to go with the 15th. On February 15, candy wrappers were found at a shed in a nearby business along the highway, near where Aisha had been running into the woods. And that's not all that was found. A pencil with Aisha's name were also found. This would be on Turner's property. This is another thing that sometimes gets conflicting statements. The candy wrappers have sometimes been omitted from certain pieces of investigation articles that I've seen. Now, the shed's owner, Harold Turner, told investigators that he hadn't seen Aisha, but noticed that the shed's door was unlocked, which was unusual. Now, inside the shed, police retrieved a Mickey Mouse hair blow, along with a pencil and marker, all of which have been confirmed to be Aisha's. While investigators know that Aisha packed her belongings in her school bag, they're unsure that only a hair bow and some school supplies were left behind. In the shed, They had also found a photograph of a black girl who's Asha's age, but has yet to be identified. Now, the very next day, February 16, Akila realized that Asha's bedroom had been missing her favorite clothing, which included a pair of jeans with a red stripe. Another small detail could play crucial to putting the pieces together and figuring out what exactly went on here. 2 days later, February 23, some neighbors reported seeing a car pulling out of the driveway of a nearby home construction site around 3:30 a.m. on the night of Asha's disappearance. The car was described as an early 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or Ford Thunderbird, dark green or black in color. Now, each of these clues seem to have raised more questions than answers. As days turn into weeks, turn into months, investigators continue to search for any leads, and the case captured national attention. Asha's story would be featured on America's Most Wanted, The Montel Williams Show, The Oprah Winfrey Show. Billboards with Asha's photo were erected alongside highways in North and South Carolina. Now, the community would rally around the Degree family, holding vigils and fundraisers. Despite all these efforts, solid leads remained elusive. The Degree family refused to give up hope, making each anniversary of Asha's disappearance with renewed pleas and information. In August 2001, major breakthroughs seemed to have occurred. A contractor working on a construction site found Asha's book bag wrapped in a plastic bag. This site was along Highway 18, about 26 to 30 miles away from where Asha was last seen. The range is because two different sources had two different numbers. Now, in her book bag, there was a few items, including Asha's New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt, book checked out from her school library, and a few other pieces of clothing. Strangely, some of the items in Asha's book bag didn't belong to her, including another New Kids on the Block t-shirt that was too large for her. This discovery was encouraging but perplexing. It confirmed that Asha had indeed left her home that night, but it raised new questions. How did her backpack end up so far away? And why was it wrapped in a plastic bag? Now, it's at this point we're going to be talking about some theories that have been speculated over the years. Now, these are all theories, and we're going to be doing this in a very respectful way. No confirmations have been made. We're going to talk about why it's possible and why it probably isn't. Now, probably what has been the number one theorized idea now would be that she had just simply ran away. Some believe she left her home voluntarily, possibly inspired by a book. Okay, now this book in question was The Whipping Boy, which was found in her backpack and had been read by her class shortly before the disappearance. Now, what supports this theory is that Asha's backpack was missing from her room. She was seen walking alone along the highway, and some of her belongings were found in the shed. Now, her backpack missing does suggest some sort of planned trip, I guess, which is why people might think that. Of course, Asha was described as very shy and afraid of the dark. She disappeared in the middle of the night, as dark as you could get. And the weather conditions were harsh. Who would purposely want to go out at that time? And she didn't go with proper clothes for the cold, which means that it wasn't really planned if she didn't even prepare for what was literally right there. Now, some people speculate that she could have been abducted. She could have been lured out by someone she possibly knew or trusted. This theory gained a lot of attraction because of Asha's shy nature and the lack of evidence for forced entry. Now, there was reportings of a green car in that area at around that same exact time of her disappearance. Backpack was also discovered about 26 miles away, suggesting it's so far away from where she should have possibly, where she could have even gone walking. And then the presence of the items in the backpack. Some of those things just didn't belong to Asha, so where did she get them, or whose items were they? Now, the reason this might just not be the case is because there was no signs of struggle whatsoever found in her home. Even if someone were to get quickly abducted, you would still likely see some form of struggle. And then Asha was seen walking alone along the highway. Alone, no other person there, suggesting it definitely could have not been an abduction, at least not right from the house, not at the time. Now, here's another kind of odd theory people have suggested over time. That's some people believe she might have sleptwalked away. She could have been sleepwalking when she left her home. While this could explain her unusual behavior, doesn't account for the missing backpack or her reaction when the driver saw her. Now, what supports this theory is it would kind of explain why she had left during such crazy weather conditions, and sleepwalking does sometimes lead to complex behaviors. Now, what doesn't help the theory though is the fact that Asha had no history of sleepwalking. Another theory that was definitely thrown around there was this whole idea that it was probably the family involved. With so many other cases, family sometimes tends to be who the culprit ends up being. However, the Degree family has been thoroughly investigated and has always cooperated with the law enforcement. Supporting the theory is, statistically, family members are often involved in missing children cases. Besides that, there's never been any evidence found to support this theory. The family has always, like I said, has always cooperated with investigators, and they, to this day, continue to advocate for Asha's case, even after 2 decades. Now, we all love a good conspiracy theory, but remember, the heart of the mystery is still a real family, still searching for answers. Now, this case has remained open. Investigators continue to follow leads, appeal for information. Let's look at a few of the more recent developments. Now, in 2016, the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office and the FBI announced that they're still investigating a possible link between her disappearance and that green vehicle that we had mentioned earlier. And they asked for anybody with information about it to come forward. During this reinvestigation, new evidence uncovered another strange clue. It was an anonymous source that reported seeing a girl matching Asha's description getting into a dark green Lincoln or Thunderbird somewhere along Highway 18 in the early hours of February 14. Now, if this anonymous source is to be believed, this is a huge development because it could be exactly the answers that they were searching for. Of course, years would pass, and in 2018, investigators did release 2 new items that were connected to the disappearance. A new Kids on the Block t-shirt and a book, Dr. Seuss's ABC's The Amazing Alphabet. Now, these items weren't actually originally listed with Asha's belongings, but were found in her backpack when it was discovered in 2001. So they were discovered in 2001. It's just not until 2018 that we were even told about them. Now in 2019, now keep in mind the dates start to get a little more diluted as we get forward, but it's in the recent years. In 2019, the FBI did announce $25,000 for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for Asha's disappearance. In 2020, the 20th anniversary of Asha's disappearance, the Cleveland County, the Sheriff's Office, and the FBI hold a press conference to renew public interest in the case. They reveal that they've received over 350 leads in just 1 year alone. 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed image of what Asha might look like at 31 years old. 2023, it remains active. FBI continues to list her disappearance on the Kidnappings and Missing Persons page, and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office maintains a dedicated tip line for the case. None of these developments have cracked the case wide open, but they demonstrate that law enforcement hasn't given up on Asha. The Degree family was changed on that February morning. Parents have shown remarkable resilience in the face of tragedy. They've maintained hope for these 3 years plus, never giving up on their daughter. Every February 14th, they organize a walk retracing the route Asha is believed to have taken, although they would later change the date to a few days after because they didn't want February 14, Valentine's Day, to be remembered for something so sad. And they've also become advocates for missing children, working alongside organizations to raise awareness. Asha's brother O'Brien was only 10 when her sister disappeared. He's spoken about the guilt for not having woken up when she left and how the disappearance has shaped his life. Shelby, North Carolina, a small town of 20,000 people, was changed after Asha's disappearance. The case shattered the town's sense of safety and innocence, but it did bring the community together. There was hundreds of people volunteering for the searches. Now her case continues to be talked about in discussions and actions regarding missing children. It does highlight the need for a quick response in missing persons cases, especially those of children, and especially for those children of color. The case has been featured on numerous crime podcasts, documentaries, keep it in the public eye, which I highly recommend. Crime Junkie podcast. I do have some memories of having heard this, but I had to completely start from scratch because it had been such a long time, but highly recommended, all-time favorite podcast. And this case has been used as a case study in law enforcement training for handling missing children cases. Now, let's analyze a little bit of what the evidence was and what we know for certain about her disappearance. Now, we do know Asha was last seen in her bed at 2:30 a.m. when her dad checked up on them. We know that it has been confirmed that she was spotted walking along Highway 18 between 3:45 and 4:15 a.m. Those truckers almost guaranteed confirmations. And now some of her belongings were definitely found in the shed about a mile from her home. Her backpack was discovered 26 miles away, 18 months after her disappearance. Puzzling things of the case, the weather. Why would a 9-year-old leave home in the middle of such a cold, rainy night? The backpack, if she was running away, why was it so far away from where she was last seen? The shed items, why would she leave some of them in the shed but keep others? The highway sightings, if she was abducted, why was she seen walking alone on the highway? And some of the unknown items, why were there items in her bag that just didn't belong to her? Now, over the years, experts have weighed in on this, including John Bishop, former FBI agent, who suggests she might have been lured out by someone she knew and trusted. Her backpacks discovered miles away does indicate foul play. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, forensic psychologist, does say that children of her age don't usually run away without significant trigger. Her items in her backpack suggest she was packing for some type of meetup, maybe somebody who had groomed her. Robert Lowry, who is part of National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, does highlight the importance of quick action in those first hours after a child goes missing. Now, this search does continue, and while we end our deep dive, I just want to make sure you guys understand that there are ways to help. You could share the information, you could use social media to spread her case. But yeah, guys, please, if you have any information, no matter how small it might seem, contact Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. And you guys can look it up. I'm not going to give that number out. Or the FBI Charlotte Field Office. Again, not giving that number out. Only if you actually have real tips, though, please. And consider supporting organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which works tirelessly on cases like Asha's. Now stay vigilant, keep your eyes open. Asha might be missing for 23 plus years, but there's always hope that she can be found. And this episode was just about as done as it could be, but turns out there's been some developments in just the last month that could possibly be the answers everybody has been searching for. So let's talk about those before we fully get off. So back when the 2 items were found in the plastic bags, they did get some evidence, some possible DNA that they could test, but of course at the time they just were not able to, so they did hold it. One of them was determined to be of Russell Underhill, who had died back in 2004. The other one was a hair stem found in Degree's shirt, which was connected to a daughter of Roy Dedman. And investigators believe that Asha was a victim of murder, and that due to the sister's young age, adult assistance was provided for her death. They also ended up seizing an older green vehicle that highly resembles the one in the connection to Degree's disappearance. Authorities do believe that Degree got into that 1970s car the night she disappeared. Now, of course, there's a lot to unpack with that, and I'm sure things are still being gone through the process. So it's something to keep a heads up and keep updated. But if this really ends up being exactly what it is, then that is insane. And wow, that's crazy. But yeah, just thought it would be necessary to mention this before we leave off the episode. Now guys, please, if you enjoyed this, I want you guys to like, subscribe, because I want to make a lot more of these videos, and I just want to make them better and better every single time, hopefully. And also let me know if you enjoy this new look. I upgraded the camera. It's not, I didn't buy another camera. I just decided to use one I wasn't using before. It's a DSLR camera, and it actually works a lot better than my 4K webcam, to be honest. I like the colors better. It really gets the picture nice and smooth. The only problem is it runs on battery, which means I've had to pause and unpause to record this for a pretty long time now. So anyway, appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, like always. See you guys on the next one.